Hi, Sudha. Good evening, and thank you for accepting the invitation for this conversation. Appreciate you taking out the time. Um, I hope you've had dinner and everything, and this is a good time to speak.
Yes, good evening, Puneet. So happy to be here. And such a big thank you to all those who are viewing us today and listening to us and watching us. Thank you
Yeah.
so much for the invite.
So, Sudha, I went through your website and I looked at all the various novels that you've published. And I know recently a new book has come out, which is Not So Charming. Is perhaps the right name of the new book?
Yes, of course, nobody can see this because, my video is, I'll reverse it. But this is the new book and this is the new cover, Not So Charming.
Very
And it
nice.
is my new book.
Great. And
Yeah.
I see a ring there, and I see a mention of the not as in the care notice. So I'm guessing this is related to a wedding somewhere.
Yes, this is about a wedding planner and a wedding photographer who meet for a wedding project, and they have to fake a relationship in order to get the project because, according to family traditions, only couples are allowed to conduct and organize and plan the wedding for this family. So
Okay. Okay. Very
that's the story. Yes, I love wedding stories. In fact, my first story, The Wedding Tamasha, uh, which was my debut novel in 2017, is
right.
also about a wedding. So
Yes.
weddings, I love weddings. I don't know why. I just love them.
It's a very Indian sentiment, and I think a lot of us who've grown up attending all these big fancy weddings have part of us falls in love with parts of the wedding, and this probably not so great parts as well. But I think there's a lot of joy, there's a lot of fun, celebration, and yeah, I think good avenue for new love stories to blossom, I guess.
Yes, very ripe environment for new love stories and for old love stories to be renewed. If you meet your old crush at the wedding and things like that. So it's a fun place to be.
Very fertile grounds. Yes, absolutely,
Yes.
indeed. So, do tell me a little bit about your background. How were the early years and childhood, and how that transcended into adolescence and your teenage years, and where did this fantasy association or the association with love stories and weddings start for you?
Yeah. I mean, I was this quiet child, an introvert, basically, who didn't have many friends. I was always lost in my own world of daydreaming and, that kind of thing. I hardly spoke.
Mhm.
But I also never ever dreamt of becoming a writer. So, as middle class families in India go, we always aspire to become either engineers or doctors and things like that. So, nobody wants you ever to say, I want to be a writer. It never even crossed my mind, to be honest. I also wanted to get into the tech field, but that sort of wears off after a while if you're not into it. At least I worked for a few years, and then I was in the US for a few years, worked there, came back to India, and uh, decided to take a break for a bit while my kids were like growing up and things like that. So afterwards, when I decided to get back into doing something for myself, the technical world no longer held its charm. There was no charm to it anymore. I had lost interest. I was way behind technologically. I had no idea what was going on in the market these days. And but I took something close. My friend was working for a technical online newspaper,
Mhm.
and she said, you were good at English in school. Why don't you join us, and then you can, work part time. So that's what I did for a bit. But even that was boring because
Mm.
technical stuff is boring for me. I just realized it wasn't the best field to choose. So I remember loving stories as a child and loving listening to stories. In fact, my grandmother lived with us for a many years where we were
Mhm.
growing up, and she would tell us these amazing stories after school. And she used to know multiple languages. Indian languages are so difficult, but she knew so many, and English, Hindi, Tamil, Malayalam. She knew all these languages, and she would read all these magazines where there were nice stories about kings and princes and all of those things, and even like gods and things like that. And she would tell us these stories, and they were fascinating, absolutely fascinating. So I remember a lot of evenings where we would come back from school and just read. I mean, listen to her stories. And there was one school. I also transferred to a lot of schools because my parents moved quite a bit in my early years, and that made me have even lesser friends to deal with and to talk to. But there was one school where there was a big, lovely library, and I remember reading one book every day, like a new book every day. And
Wow.
my favorites were all those Mallory Towers and Famous Five and Secret Seven and all of the books I could lay my hands on. I think I was in that school for about 2 or 3 years, and I must have exhausted literally all the books that were my age from the library. And after that, so when I joined this technical newspaper, and then I decided, no, that wasn't something that was really helping me creatively. I wasn't enjoying it. My whole uh, idea was to have fun as I went, like have some joy in my life and what I was doing. And one day, I just went to a library reading, like an author reading, just like this. You and I are talking, and there was another author talking about his debut book, and I was like really in raptures listening to him. He also played his guitar after talking about his book, and these are two of my favorite things: books and music.
Very nice.
So I was like, I think that might have stayed with me after I left. I mean, I never thought of writing a book even then. That might have stayed with me though, the memory. And later, a few months down the line, I said, I'm just tired of doing this technical writing stuff. It's so boring, it's so mundane and so routine. There's nothing new. It's just read everything. I mean, there is news, but it's like the same old format, and it's not exciting. So I just wrote a story. It just came out of the blue. I wrote a story, and I was looking for online magazines to send it to, because I'd heard that some online magazines take these short stories. And it got rejected.
Surprise, surprise.
But surprise, surprise, what's new? But the editor was a really, really kind woman, and she said, you do have potential. You should write us another piece next month. Let's see, if that works out. And that really gave me hope. That really inspired me and encouraged me to go on. And I'm sure if she had written something nasty, I would never have bothered to even try. Yeah. But her words gave me hope. They encouraged me. And I decided to, learn actually how am I supposed to write? What is required? Because short story is a very different and a little difficult medium, because you've got a lot of say. And the kind of stories that I saw in the magazines and then that I read had a very different kind of ending. It's not a nice wrapped package like a gift box, like they end in a different way, and they just allow the reader to ponder over what has happened in the story and what might happen or what may have happened in the future, that sort of thing, and bring out an emotion. That's the goal or the target of a short story. So it took a while to understand that medium. I did that for a few years. Luckily, a few tries later, I was accepted by the magazine, but it was off and on. Sometimes they would like the story, sometimes they would not. But it gave me a chance to experiment with a lot of different ideas and plots, and the things that excited me is what I decided to carry on into a long form of writing. And it was back in 2016 when I said, I'd really like to try a longer form. And what happens, and so I started this 10 years before I decided to write long form. So I was writing for quite a bit, off and on, writing here, writing there, trying this, trying that. And, when you're habituated to something like a short form, it's so difficult to move into long form. And I was actually writing only 1,200 word story for that magazine. So from 1,200 words, imagine going up to 60,000 words plus. It was like literally like, it felt like a nightmare. Like, how was I going to do this? And I remembered, just to get into that spirit of writing longer form, joining the NaNoWriMo back in, it's a novel writing month in November that the whole world participates in. And I joined that in 2015 or 16.
Sure.
And as you would expect, I came to half, like whatever I wanted to say, to half the book, and then I couldn't think of what else to write because obviously I didn't know how to write long form. So I went back to the learning board, learned how to plot, at least to get some sort of form and skeleton to get my story going. Because I knew that if I tried this way of writing without learning how to write, I was going to leave every story midway because I wouldn't know what to do with it, right? And so initially, the thing that inspired my first story was my brother's wedding. And it was, even before we went to the wedding, I remember talking to my sister and saying, hey, I think I should have a bunch of short stories and kind of tie them all together and make it into a long story about a wedding. And then I said, no, maybe that won't look, that'll be too many characters and they won't all mesh together. And I had all kinds of, I'm a perfectionist, by the way. Even back in the day, I'm trying to get myself off of that, like trying to be so perfect and or not do anything. So that fear of not getting it right. So I remember thinking about that, and then the idea for the story started popping into my head back then. And then we actually went to the wedding, and more ideas started popping up.
Right.
And then I started thinking about who would be the protagonist of this story. I mean, it's a wedding story, but there's got to be somebody who's important, who the story is on. And that turned out to be this girl who was already married. She's part of this big family of 3 siblings, and she's got a really very, very strong and uh, father who's like stubborn and very disciplined and strict. And she marries a man who's abusive. And she runs away. So that's how the story starts. She starts working at a Mexican cafe because she's gone to the US after marriage, and she runs away from her marriage and hides until she has to show up at home because her brother's wedding is happening in a month. And now she's in a fix. So what does she do now? And that's how the story begins to, open itself out and play out. So I picked a topic like that, and yet my story is not about marital abuse. It's just somebody who's escaping from the clutches of the kind of the dominating and the kind of societal structure that we have, where once you're married, especially here in India, it's taboo to walk out of it or to leave it or whatever. And no matter how bad your husband is or whatever it is, nobody accepts you for those things, so like that's unacceptable to your family. So and then she and then she meets her old crush at the wedding, and then the story develops. So what happens? Does she escape this her husband, and how does she convince her father, or whatever she does, and however the story progresses. And all through it is the backdrop of the wedding, the preparations for the wedding, the actual cooking of the feast at the wedding, then the various ceremonies at the wedding. And I really had a blast writing that book because it gave me an opportunity to hit so many different fun elements of a wedding, and yet have a subject that was inspiring and motivational, and asking the young generation and the young women and men of today to take that step towards being your own person and making your own choices versus being under the pressure, family pressure, and dealing with that kind of stuff. So that was my whole first story.
I wanted to see when I saw you had an interview on I think your story where I read that you chose to go the KDP way for your first book. And
yes.
So I just wanted to know how that experience was for you, the publishing part of it after the writing had happened already.
Oh, KDP has been a blessing, I must tell you. All the independent authors today, I'm sure, are wishing KDP, wishing the most gratitude towards KDP, because it helped us, or me also, bring out what I wanted as quickly as possible. And what happens is when you face, and I was facing a lot of rejections after finishing my manuscript, after finishing the draft, after I had revised it, looked at it, and all of that, I sent it to a few publishers. As usual, I didn't hear back from anyone.
Right.
And so that would have made me lose hope. And like everything, when you have the kind of motivation and that power to go on and do something and write, because that you bring with it a lot of energy that you put into the book, and you really want to see the book come somewhere, go somewhere,
Right.
and be read and be appreciated and all of that stuff. So it was a blessing that I decided that I'm not going to wait anymore, because I had actually seen a few other authors and KDP doing well. They had started publishing multiple books. They had published multiple books, and it felt like a very satisfying thing to do, to write and publish my own books instead of waiting for somebody and wasting all that time. Since I was already, after writing this book, I'd already had the next book, the idea for the next book. So I didn't want to wait forever, and let everything sizzle off and so
Yes.
KDP announced its contest in 2017, just as I had just wrapped up the book, finished getting it edited, finished the cover design, and so I decided, what, let me just put this book on KDP for the contest. And it doesn't matter. All I'm looking for is the exposure and the fact that my book is out. So even if it shows up on any page of the contest, that's good enough for me. Somebody will pick it up, somebody will read it, somebody will like it, and that's good enough for me.
Right.
But lucky me that the book was one of the 5 finalists and went on to become the winner in the contest. So I was really, really blessed and really, really happy that the coincidence really worked out in my favor, that I was ready, and KDP had just launched their first contest in India, and I was there. It's just the right timing and being in the right space at the right time. That's all I can attribute it, but KDP has been a blessing in that sense.
Congratulations on the win. I'm 100% sure it was not just coincidence, and a lot of talent and skill. Also, the content of your book must have held its head high amongst the competition. So, and it's no mean feat, by the way. So, congratulations on that.
Thank you so much.
I was looking at the rest of the book. So, have you stayed with KDP for the subsequent books, or did you then move on to a traditional publisher because the first book did so well?
I stayed with KDP for a long time. I'm still with KDP. Even this book now is a KDP book, the newest book.
Sure.
Because it just helps me publish at my own schedule. And it helps me. I took a break from writing last year, which I couldn't have done if I was with a traditional publisher. And it just helps me create and be happy with what I'm creating at my convenience, my schedule. So if I want to do it faster, I'm usually not so fast. I'm slower than most indie authors. So I am now kind of a hybrid author, because I have done 1 or 2 traditionally published books, but I am predominantly KDP.
Okay. Yeah. And how do you go about the paperback version? Because in India, KDP doesn't offer the publishing, the paperback publishing. So do you then do something else to complement that?
Puneet, paperback in India has been the bane of my existence because I haven't been able to crack that. But recently, so after I published my first book in 2017, and it is just last year that I started rolling out my books into paperback in India, and internationally, of course, but in India mainly because I signed up with Notion Press to kind of you give them everything and they'll just put it out there. But the unfortunate thing for me was I came in late into the game because Notion Press was offering it free to everyone. You could just put your book up on Amazon for free with them. Unfortunately, by the time I got into this game, they started charging you for putting it up on Amazon. So that I can sell my books free on the Notion Press site, which is what I've done with this latest book, Not So Charming, because it is an investment. And unless, see, my readers are predominantly Kindle Unlimited readers, because I started off like that with the KDP contest. So they have like a Kindle Unlimited library of books where people can just borrow, read, and return. So that's how I started. So my readers are mainly on KDP. and so they are not used to my paperbacks. So it might take them a while. If they want to, if they come to know about it now, they might pick them up, but until then it's just a game of waiting, because I haven't really been actively pursuing paperback in all of these years. My
Yeah.
ebooks were doing fine. So but now I do want to get into paperback, because why not? I mean, even if it's on Notion Press, and even if it's some bit of effort to do that, I would like to give that option and choice to my readers. So if they want to, they can pick up paperback as well.
Yeah. How do you go about your editing process when you are in the middle of having written the book and publishing it on KDP? So that intermediate path where you're trying to get someone's feedback on it, the beta readers or the editors. How do you go about that?
I have a few editor contacts, and I can share them with you, and you can see if they work for you.
Sure.
And I have tried some of them in the past. Uh, and I have also tried, using the actual paid versions of editing software like Grammarly or all of
Right.
that, to kind of at least fix all the errors and mistakes and things like that.
Correct.
So there are two ways you can go about it. There are beta readers who can read for you, and you can take your time to get feedback from multiple people and then
Right.
work on your book, as well as an editor who understands your genre, like you said, is very good to have, because then they can give you critical feedback on what you need to improve in certain areas of your book.
Right.
So that's something you got to figure out on your own. And if your genre keeps changing, then definitely, you might need different editors for different ways of doing things. But I've seen having that plus a reader or two, plus some paid editing software that works on your. So basically, like a proofreading software, like basically looking at all your grammar and punctuation. That is a good combination to have for your book.
You know what was very refreshing when I saw your page. It had all the books. First of all, I think all the book covers are super fun. They have I don't know, they seem very light-hearted. So I somehow feel like I should pick up this book and at least see what's inside. And I think that's great. The other thing which I noticed was there is um, there is a I don't know, there's a fun or naughty element to how you name your books. So, for example, even in this book, there is a not as charming, and then you have taken a spin at on the word not, and then there is there's a book in which Mr. and Mrs. Nambiar, I think they go to America, and you've written it as America, so which is very interesting. When I saw the cover, how do you go about? Because I think a lot of success for books is also in catching someone's attention by the name that you or the title that you attribute to it. How do you balance the fun elements with I'm sure there are deeper stories. For example, in your first book, you're talking about this whole backdrop of a relationship that has gone sour, but then you are taking those characters from there to a more positive state where they find new love and they move on and find themselves. So it's not like a light subject. It's a subject which is quite deep and poignant in that way. So how do you do that? Like, how do you create deeper stories in the realm of something which seems fun, or it may seem okay, this is just one of those love stories. How do you do that? How do you balance that?
That comes from the idea of having stories made for to inspire women to take charge of their life, to encourage them to form their own, a set of rules by which they go about living, and what they work as, and how they do in life, and who they choose as a partner. And that has been a very important consideration for me as I write my books, because that's always been at the back of my head. I want these girls to be strong, and I want these women to feel stronger wherever they are and in whatever situation they are. Plus the aspect of play and playfulness, which has always been kind of the spine of my books, because I like that. I like having fun. When I write, I like to giggle at my own words, and sometimes I'll have to cut those words out because I'm like, what is it even doing in these in this book because I'm having so much fun, but I don't think the reader is going to, maybe this needs to go somewhere else.
Right.
So I like having fun. I'm very, very curious. I love eavesdropping on people's conversations. Unfortunately, it's only my husband in coffee shops who can really hear what people are saying. I always tell him, you always get the right thoughts because I can't hear what they're saying and you can. And you're not even writing. So let me sit there, But so all of those things, and I am a romantic at heart, and I have grown up even as a young girl. I remember like some serials which were very like strong subjects of maybe divorce or whatever. And however they find love, it's the subtlety that I go for. The subtlety. Today in romance novels, you see that, and I have to learn to voice the feelings, make them louder, because for me, it comes with just a glance. A glance can say so much more than words can, and so that part of it can only be shown on the screen unless I become louder with my writing, and I'm learning to do that. Those are some of my things. So, explaining to the reader why she likes them, it's hard for me to do because you just like somebody and that's it. So, my romance comes with those risks, well, it's fun. I mean, I like to have fun. That's the basic reason why I write. I love write. I love the joy of writing, and as the words flow, and being in that state where I'm just so happy typing away and making up something in my head that I don't realize how time passes. So that's it. And then the important subjects that I do want to talk about, like for instance, Mr. and Mrs. Nambiar. They're an older couple, and it's about retirement and how life changes for that poor woman and how she has to stand up, to get back her peace and her space and all of that stuff. So that's more a family drama kind of thing, because that's not a romance genre. That's a slightly separate thing. That's a family drama. But my books are also multi-generational in the sense there's almost always a grandmother in the story. And so matriarchs form a major part of my books because I had this grandmother as I was growing up in my house. So my grandmother. So grandmothers, and in Kerala also you have this matriarch. It's not actually that much prevalent. I mean, it's not too much of that. We just think that the mother is at the top of the chain, but I love the fact that a woman gets to have the final say, and she is at the top of the whole family structure, and she plays such a vital role in the lives of her children and her grandchildren. So those are some of the things I really go for. And second of all, the relationship, and the best and the most fun I have is with arranged marriages and that whole trope, because it's so funny that in India, still a lot of people have, now we have these matrimonial sites, and you see someone and you meet them and then you marry them. And although I did the very very same thing, I'm just having a laugh at it now. Because I just got lucky, but I'm just having a laugh at it.
In fact,
so that's how I write.
In fact, that was one question I wanted to ask you. That you're writing about all these strong women and their place in a relationship and marriages and other things. I wanted to ask you what thoughts your husband has on that, and does he fear that someone's going to project your stories onto him?
Thank God he doesn't read my books. It was so surprising. I think I just lucked out because I found such a kind and caring person who loves me so much. But I met him 15 days before we got married. And that's like, you cannot even believe you did that, but those are the days. Right. And things went beautifully. But yeah, he doesn't read my books, and I do not ask him to read my books because, but my stories are about having fun and liking someone. But yeah, when I talk about the arranged marriages in my books, I'm usually making fun of the guys, like those who come to see the girl. I'm usually making fun of them and how the girl tries to, get herself out of that situation, out of having to see these guys. So it's those kind of things are fun for me.
So while I'm tempted to read your books, I'm also, I think, cautious now as to what I might write. Although I think the good thing is I never went that route, so it's good for me. But Yeah.
Good for
Interesting.
you.
Good for me, for sure, for sure. This new book that you've just released, tell me a little bit about what it is, what's the storyline for it, or what's the plot summary, and what's the initial response been? It's been out for, I think, a couple of weeks now, if not more.
Yes, yes, it has. And the response has been good. I'm really happy with where the things have picked up after my gap of a year or so. My readers have gotten back to it. I'm keeping my fingers crossed that it continues that way, and they're loving it.
Great.
I am a visual person, so the inspiration for the book came when I recently went on a trip and a short kind of trip, and we were a bunch of friends, and there was a photographer who was asked to take a selfie of a photograph of all of us. And the way he held the camera, it was his phone, but the way he held it, because he is a photographer, that style that
Yeah,
comes with doing something different than a normal person would. And I was like, And sometimes these visual images stay with me quite a bit. And so I did want to write about a photographer actually.
sure.
And then I've, in the past, as I've read about wedding planners and things like that, so a lot of things come together in a book. Like you might have heard of something a long time ago, read something and thought, hey, I would like to write a book like that. Or you've seen something in the recent past and it stays with you, and then that becomes your muse. And for me, visual is a big, big thing for me, something that's visually caught my attention.
Sure.
It really holds me and holds me down and makes me want to write about that thing. So when I started this story, it was about two people who are opposites. One is like the perfectionist, meticulous. She's broken up with her ex-partner and her ex-boyfriend, and she wants to start her own business. So she's like the startup rising and starting from scratch. And she's not getting business, although she's already been quite a success in the past as part of her partnership with a guy.
Right.
And and uh, and these two have had some issues in the past. They've met before, and they've had some. She doesn't like him, so they kind of not. There are some misunderstandings. So when they have to work together, and not only do they have to work together now, they're supposed to act like they are a couple. They're supposed to pretend like they are engaged, if not married. That is how I bring the fun element into the story as to how the wedding and the preparations and the planning for the wedding becomes the backdrop, and how these two and their relationship blossoms in that space, and how he's such a vivacious, a funny, a charming kind of guy. And that's where the book's name comes from, charming, because he's so charming and he's so nice. And not signifies that it's a wedding story. There's a wedding. So KNOT, not, that's the wedding story. So I just felt it was a beautiful play on words, not so charming. Oh, who does he think he is? He's not so charming, and then you have the KNOT coming there. So
Right.
that's the story of the book. And for me, a lot of my stories have always been associated with visual cues. Like, for instance, The Girl with a Secret Crush. It's really done really well. It's a short story. It's about a proofreader who has this crush on a big time author, and he doesn't even know she exists, but she really likes his books, and she's been reading and proofreading his books and all of that stuff. And one day, as luck would have it, she gets a chance to meet him. And does that change what, the future is for her, and how she deals with that? So that came about when I went to one of these literary, the festive festivals, and I saw a young author try to get a photograph with an established author, and he was struggling because the established author didn't even look his way. He just was off in his own thing, and I was like, what if this young person who was trying to meet this big author was actually a woman who really liked him, and she was being desperately trying to meet him, and this opportunity slips right by her. And what if there is a lucky serendipitous chance to meet him again, and meet him and actually talk to him and actually spend time with him? What would that be like? So that's how that story came about.
Right.
So all of these stories have come about from, and then the want to write these stories has been so strong. Sometimes there are times when there is a lull, like, nothing comes to mind. I don't know what to write.
Mhm.
And I'm just like, floating in the air thinking, okay, what now? And that doesn't really inspire me. So when I see something, and that comes from traveling, from meeting people, from talking to people, and more often than not, I love listening to people so much that many a times, many things I hear or what they say end up in my stories. So they never know about it and they're not mentioned, but it ends up in my story. That's how I like to do it. Yeah.
Very, very nice. Um, I mean, I think each and every author I've spoken to as part of my um, interview series, I think this stands out as a loud and clear common message, common ground. A lot of them, and they derive parts of the stories and the characters that they build from real life. And then that's why I think some books connect with you so much when you can see a part of you reflected in it, even though you don't know the author. And some of those moments are the best moments because it makes you feel that you are a part of that book.
Yes. And that's been one of the most uh, um, the best feedback I've got from readers, and the reviews that say that they felt like they belong to that world, or they've actually seen that particular thing play out in front of them, and they feel like they're there. And then many a times they may not have read a book for years, and then they come to a book like The Wedding Tamasha, and then they're like, I was hooked. So that's great news that you're able to pull a reader into the world and then let them enjoy and savor those stories for a few hours at least.
Yeah,
Pick
yeah.
me up.
So, which city are you currently based in, Sudha?
I'm in Bangalore, actually.
Okay, great. Me too.
Yes, 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 I know. And so I'm so happy to hear that. It's always nice to have authors who live nearby and who, live in the same city.
Yes, we should definitely find an opportunity to catch up in person as well.
Yes,
It's
yes.
been super nice talking to you today. And I don't think there's enough time in the world to keep this conversation active. Uh, we are almost at the 1 hour mark. So
Ooh,
before,
did I
yeah,
talk so much?
yeah, we are. I think we started 5 minutes late because of the Instagram hassles, but um, I just wanted to conclude the conversation at least for today by asking you the any parting thoughts that you want to give to budding authors, into indie authors, people who are thinking about publishing themselves, or even readers for that matter.
To me, it's always been about following your heart and following your joy, because I think wherever you find joy, success will follow, money will follow, and your readers will follow. And same with them, when they find joy, the readers will follow those stories. So it's about doing the things that you enjoy and love doing. And that's all I ever do and care about, basically. And there are times when I get stressed and say, oh no, what about all this? And then I'm like, no, 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 I'm just going to have fun and do my work.
So, as an author, the joy of writing is the one that guides and drives everything that you do. How about the accolades and the awards and the number of books sold? I mean, what do those metrics do for you?
That is always secondary, because when I write, I'm not thinking about the awards and I'm not thinking about the money. And that's why many of the books are very close to my heart. And I'm not really, really following the market all that much. Actually, I didn't even know I was doing anything to do with the market. I remember my first book when a reader commented saying, this is the best friend, brother's best friend trope. And I was offended because I was like, that's not, I didn't write that. I didn't write some trope that I found somewhere. This is my own story. But then I realized that readers like certain tropes,
Yeah,
especially in romance. They like certain tropes. So it's good. So I'm only now able to, and there are tropes that I like myself. So I'm trying to marry the two, use the tropes that I like and also what readers like, and now bring out the stories that I enjoy as well as will appeal to a bigger audience and more people, so that more people can enjoy my stories. But that's not the thing I start with when I write. It's
sure.
always about what drives me and what pulls at my heart and tells me to go ahead with a particular story based on what I've seen or what I've heard and what has really um, uh, helped me and told me to, like, you have to write this, and then that's what I write. That's how I go about it.
Great. It's super nice to hear that. It's good to see that your North Star is very, very solidly focused on the on the process and not the results.
Yes, and I would really love if my books got adapted, if I sold a lot of print books and all of that stuff. Uh, but all that comes afterwards. The first thing is the story and what I would love to share with the world. That's always number one.
I think that brings us to the end of today's conversation. Sudha, it was really, really nice speaking with you. It was a real pleasure. And hope to do it again sometime over a cup of coffee after I have read your book.
Sure, would love that. Absolutely. And thank you so much, Puneet. You've been a delight to speak with today.
Thank you. Thank you for the kind words. Have a very good night. And I wish all the success to the new book. And let's see what's cooking next in your kitchen.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
All right.
Bye.
A very good night to you. Bye-bye.
Nice.